You're tuned in to Uncovering Dark Falls, winner of 0 journalism awards. However, I have won every single game of flashlight tag I've ever played, and you'll just have to trust me on that. Dark Falls is a weird place, man. I mentioned in the last episode that every time I drove past this particular school, I was always just kind of awestruck by the big auditorium that kind of sits in the back. Everything about it just feels off, to use the most cliche line ever. My phone shuts off whenever I walk past this school or even drive past it. If I've got my earbuds in, they power down and they disconnect as well. And everything does that. Every single mystery that I've covered so far, whether it's a place or something like this, I walk past it and just everything turns off. I have been doing some shady business, though, that I have not been telling you about. And that is that I found that if I bring my 2003 Digicam with me to these places, that still works. One of you asked how I'm able to grab photographs of these places that I'm talking about and visiting in my town if my phone shuts off. Well, for some reason, this 20-something-year-old handheld camera, that still works. So thankful for that, I guess. I don't know why, but that's also why the images, that I use for the cover art, it look like that. Sorry. Dark Falls has a more traditional idea of education than some places. They have this K-12 school, and I'm told it's very good. The class sizes are small. The sports teams are usually in the top 5 in the state, and the school library has this program that supplements needed books from the local library. It's Miss Dark's pet project. The kids seem happy, and, when the kids are happy, then this school day goes by a little quicker. And in this day and age, it's a little hard to get on campus when you're a bachelor, like me. But I had to have a look at something, and it was important enough to risk a trespass charge. The fence was pretty easy to jump, and I might have to send an anonymous letter to the school board letting them know how easy it is to infiltrate the back end of the school. Dark Falls Primary School has a nice, modern look on the surface, with a state-of-the-art cafeteria, a beautiful glassed-in library, and a gymnasium that doubles as the school's auditorium. I've been told that their summer and fall productions are really something to see, and their drama program often rivals districts with much bigger budgets. I also heard that their rendition of The Addams Family last year took 3 of the kids to state competition, and a duo received exceptional marks for their rendition of Crazier Than You. But none of these things explain why I feel so weird when I drive past this school. I'm getting to that. If you look really closely while you run the track, you can see the decrepit remains of the old school. It's not much. There's a few classrooms, the old gym, and the towering brick edifice of the old auditorium. They say that the plays that were put on there, once upon a time, were really something to see, but they also say that some of the actors never graduated and they actually went on to Broadway. They say that sometimes if you hang around after dark, you can see a mysterious figure lurking around the old auditorium. And if you believe the rumors, he has a dark and checkered past. Apparently, he's the reason that they won't perform The Phantom in the new auditorium. They're afraid that they might invite some of that old magic onto their brand new stage and call down the Phantom once again. The lampposts still work outside the old auditorium, though. And as I stand here, looking up at the vine-covered face of the old place, it's really hard to imagine it ever teeming with the sounds of kids laughing and bells ringing. The story goes that during the early years of the school, the Phantom was set to be performed for a packed house. The boy who was supposed to play him, unfortunately now his name has been lost to time, he disappears before the first curtain call, and he's never seen again. They also say that he haunts the old auditorium, thwarting any attempt to put on the play. And for this reason, all copies of the script and all the sets from that night were destroyed. But one seemed to have survived to breed the story that seems more prominent now than the legend itself. Maybe that's what made the Phantom so angry. Nobody likes to be upstaged by a sequel, I get it. Decades after the first disastrous showing of the play, the theater teacher, Mrs. Walker, finds a copy of the old script and she decides to put it on. She says, quote, "After so long and such a checkered past, I knew it would pack the theater if I could put on the production of The Phantom," end quote. The play was nothing innovative, right? But it did have a classic formula that was likely to put butts in seats. The Phantom is about a theater owner named Carlos, a theater owner who fears his theater might be haunted. In the basement of his theater, there's a deformed phantom who hides his scarred face behind a mask. Now, Carlos's daughter, Esmeralda, she falls in love with the Phantom. But her boyfriend, Eric, he finds out and he kills the masked man. The Phantom remains as a ghost to haunt the theater forever. Mrs. Walker still teaches theater at the school, but now she sticks with established works. Brooke Rogers and Zeke Matthews are cast in the leading roles of Esmeralda and the Phantom. Zeke seems pretty excited about this, being a huge horror fan, and was said to really throw himself into the role. Tina Powell, who was Brooks' understudy, was less thrilled though. Not about not getting a good part, but about the play in general. Quote, "My grandpa was part of the original play, and he told stories about the Phantom to scare us. He always said that the play was cursed, and when Mrs. Walker said that she found a copy, I got scared." Quote. That comes straight from Tina Powell. Tina, now a teacher at the very same school, was the only one who told me about the legend. She's my neighbor, and she knows that I've been investigating, let's call it, the spooky side of Dark Falls. She too seems to be keeping an eye on the staggering amount of local legends in the area, and she's been a wealth of information since I started my investigation. She goes on to say, quote, "So I warned them. I was kind of a know-it-all when I was a kid, so most of them just rolled their eyes at me, but I could tell that they were spooked too. The old auditorium had," and then she snaps her fingers a little, trying to find the word, and then it comes to her, "a spirit, all on its own. This new one is nice. The speakers work well, and the seats are comfy, but it just doesn't have the presence that the old place had. It also doesn't have a trap door," end quote. I was standing on the stairs to the old auditorium wondering how I was going to get in for a closer look, when the door suddenly creaked open. Now, I'm no fool, and I can smell a trap when one's being set, but this didn't feel like that. I felt invited, like someone was honestly beckoning me into their home, and who was I to refuse such an invitation? Ah, yes, the trapdoor. All the stories that I've heard seem to involve that trapdoor. It was installed during the initial performance so the Phantom could mysteriously rise from the stage. Mrs. Walker was hoping to use it again, but even she admitted that it wasn't ready for opening night. Zeke, however, was very interested in this trapdoor, and he wanted to have a look under the stage. Mrs. Walker warned them that it was dangerous down there, but after play practice disbanded, Zeke and Brooke decided that a quick peek couldn't hurt. It's said that they found a labyrinth under that stage, a winding mess of corridors and hallways, and the two decided to go back up before they got good and lost. On their way out, they meet, or maybe they're more likely startled, by an old janitor named Emile. He asks what they're doing down there, and he warns them of the dangers under the stage. The next day, however, Brooke finds something new in her seat. It's a boy named Brian. Quote, "He just sort of appeared one day," Tina told me over coffee. "He told us he moved from Indiana, and Brooke took a liking to him right away. I think, that maybe made Zeke a little jealous, but he figured that he'd have her all to himself during play practice. When she brought Brian with her, though, trying to get him apart, I think it really ticked Zeke off," end quote. Mrs. Walker remembers seeing him too, Brooke would try to get her new friend Brian a spot in the production, but, by then casting was already finalized. Brian, however, would still have a place on this stage, or more accurately, behind it, I should say. Mrs. Walker had him making sets with Tina, but she could tell that what he wanted was a place on stage, preferably next to Brooke. Tina said he had puppy dog eyes for her, but Brooke was more interested in solving this feud between her and Zeke. For whatever reason, Brooke had found a threatening note in her locker, along with a mask that nearly took her breath away. It said, "Stay away from my home sweet home." But Brooke believed that it was just Zeke playing tricks, Tina tells me more about what happened, and she says, Zeke was a trickster, for sure, but he was steadfast that he wasn't the one doing any of this, or any of this stuff that came after it. Brooke thought it was me after her role. What a laugh. The role was cursed. I wouldn't have taken it even if they begged me. Still, I suppose in her mind it was either me or Zeke that was causing all the weird stuff around the set. Not like it could be a real phantom, she said with this oddly knowing smile. Walking into the auditorium was like walking into a crypt. The only butts in these seats these days were spiders, and the stage looked vast and empty in the moonlight. I had my trusty mag light out, 5 parts illumination, 5 parts club, and was scanning around for any trace of an ambusher. I had felt invited, but I wasn't about to get, bonked by some hobo for being too curious. I could see what Tina had been talking about as I looked at the old auditorium. The place seemed to breathe with life and spirit. Tina was there when Brooke was attacked by the Phantom. The lights went out suddenly, and when Brooke screamed, everyone looked to the catwalk as a man came swinging down to land on the stage. "Go away, Esmeralda! Go away!" That's what he yelled at her. Then, as quick as he appeared, he sank into the stage on a trap door and was gone. Everyone assumed that it was Zeke, but he wasn't even at school during rehearsal. He's been at the dentist that afternoon. He had the note and everything. And that left many of them wondering if there really was a phantom haunting the auditorium. Maybe the play really was cursed, and if it was, they might be cursed along with it. The next day, Brooke and Zeke, they do a little sleuthing. Kids after my own heart, I tell you what. And they ask the lady in the office about Emile, the so-called night janitor. She tells them that there is no night janitor, and no one named Emile works at the school. This leads them to suspect that he might be their mysterious phantom, and they return to the stage only to find all of the scenery vandalized. Brooke, or rather Esmeralda, is warned to stay away from his home. But Mrs. Walker has had enough. She blames Zeke for the vandalism, and when they find the paint in his locker, it seems like a closed case. Zeke swears up and down, though, that it wasn't him. Brooke actually believes him, although Mrs. Walker doesn't. She removes him from the play and threatens to cancel the production altogether if anything else happens. Tina tells me this. She says, Zeke got himself grounded to boot, but that didn't seem to dampen his spirit. He still wanted to know who was behind it more than ever now, and I heard that Brooke and Brian were intent on clearing his name. The three of them go down into the trapdoor, despite Zeke's grounding, right? And when they emerged, they had found enough evidence to clear Zeke and get him his part back. In the maze below the stage, the three friends discovered a room where, quote, the Phantom had been living. They get confronted by Emile, but they managed to escape into the tunnels, where they were rescued by their principal, who heard a ruckus from above the stage. The police are called, and Emile is discovered to be a homeless man who's been living under the stage and using the legend of the Phantom to keep people away. Now, if you were me in the moment, you might think that just sounds like a closed case, right? Close it up, put a stamp on it, put a fork in it, whatever other, finale metaphors you can you can think of. But not quite. I freeze in place as I hear a grinding noise from the stage. Maybe the same noise that got the attention of Brooke's principal. It was probably once a silent elevator to the understage, but after years of inattention, it's made it sound ghastly indeed. I point my light at the stage, and something rises. Something I should have probably expected after the end of Tina's story. Tina goes on to say, "Opening night was a great success. Z got his role back after they arrested the guy living under the stage, and it looked like we were going to have a hit. All of the mystery around the play, not to mention the news about Emil and what had been happening at the school, ensured us a full house on opening night." Brooke stood there, waiting for Zeke to emerge from the trap door, but what came up didn't seem right. He went way off script, talking about waiting 70 years to play this role and how he had fallen on opening night to his death. As Tina was telling me this, she shivers a little. The night is still very clearly fresh in her mind. She goes on. "He was talking about the kid who was supposed to play the Phantom that night, and I think we all realized that it wasn't Zeke pretty quick. Brooke, who knows why, pushed him into the trap door, the one that he claimed had taken his life to start, and the audience applauded like it was the best thing they'd ever seen. Later, when Zeke came up through the trap door, he said that someone had knocked him out, and we all believed him. Whoever had given that performance most definitely was not Zeke, no question, and we'd likely never see him again." As the trap door came up, I saw a pint-sized phantom with his cloak swirling. "I trust you found what you came for?" he asked, and all I could do was nod. Then he laughed, deep and resonating, and as he swirled his cloak, I saw him vanish in a billow of dust and fabric. He appeared right before my eyes on the stage that he had loved so much. The Phantom wasn't the only one to disappear that night. Brian was never seen again. But if you believe Brooke, and Tina said she did, then he was the one who gave that commanding performance. Tina goes on to say, quote, "She found a yearbook in her locker from 1923, the year that play had originally debuted at the school. And Brian's picture was there on the cast page, done in memoriam since he had disappeared. It was him. Even in the grainy old picture that they had, it was him. They never performed the play again after that, and a couple of years later, they built the new auditorium, and they just left this one to rot." End quote. I smiled as the laughter quieted and packed up my light to go. And I suppose that it had been I who saw the final performance of the Phantom, whether I knew it or not. And that is case closed, at least in my mind, on the Phantom of the Auditorium. I've been cruising around Reddit lately, just to kind of kill time between applying for jobs and stuff. And I keep seeing the weirdest things. People are posting about Dark Falls, the town that I live in, but they're deleting the posts almost right away. Most of them, at least. And I'm seeing these mentions of Dark Falls pop up in the creepy corners of Reddit, r/cryptid, r/high strangeness, all of those, dude. I gotta check this out. I wonder if somebody knows something about this town that I don't. Thank you for listening. Hey, consider joining the Patreon. It's $5 a month, and that gets you access to a bunch of stuff. Very early access to episodes. They're interruption-free episodes. And maybe most importantly is voting privileges. You know, I'm going to kind of lift the curtain a little bit here. We love Goosebumps. Me and the team behind Uncovering Dark Falls, it's a total of 3 people right now, love Goosebumps, dude. And we all have our favorite episodes and favorite stories and stuff from this series, but we want your help in figuring out which stories to cover next.
Uncovering Dark Falls is written by David Caleb and Dr. Plague. Created, produced, and narrated by Darek Weber.